Yo, thank you for joining. I really appreciate it. It's 1:29 p.m. Pacific time. It's March 22nd, 2026. Hope you're having a good day. Let's begin. Preserving filibuster matters more than passing the SAVE Act. Just don't do it. Republicans in the U.S. Senate are under increasing pressure from President Donald Trump to pass the Save America Act, and while the legislation to ensure only U.S. citizens vote in federal elections is important and widely popular, any effort to do away with the filibuster should be a non-starter. The long-standing Senate rules that require a 60 vote threshold to move forward on most legislation are there for a reason. They force the chamber to debate and compromise, and they purposefully make it harder to get a bill over the finish line. Yet, as Senate Majority Leader John Thune, a Republican from South Dakota, has acknowledged, he's got a math problem. With a 53-member majority, he simply doesn't have the number of senators to reach the magic 60 number. A handful of Democrats would need to get on board. For now, Thune's plan is to have a robust debate on the bill and then bring it to a vote, even though it's almost certain to fail. I can guarantee the debate, Thune said recently. I can guarantee a vote, I just can't guarantee an outcome. The Senate Republican leader is getting pressure from some within his party, including Utah Senator Mike Lee, to look at more extreme options, including the archaic talking filibuster, or even worse, doing away with the legislative filibuster altogether. GOP shouldn't backtrack on filibuster for now, or support now. GOP shouldn't backtrack on filibuster support now. Republicans have stood for protecting the filibuster in recent years, when Democrats came close to nuking it in 2022, so they could pass voting legislation of their own. Thankfully, two principal Democrats, former West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin and former Arizona Senator Kristen Sinema, voted with Republicans to safeguard the long-standing rules. Senate Republicans, now in a similar position to Democrats in 2022, shouldn't cave. While it may give them a short-term win, they'd be responsible for letting Senate Democrats railroad through their extreme agenda next time they are in power. As Thune said in his speech on the Senate floor in 2021, no matter how appealing it might be in the moment, destroying this long-standing protection for minority rights would be a grave error that both parties would live to regret. That's just as true today. Cornyn is acting like a hypocrite for political reasons. Unfortunately, some GOP senators are backtracking on their former support for the filibuster. Senator John Cornyn, Republican from Texas, for instance, was once a steadfast supporter of protecting Senate rules. In 2022, when Democrats sought to blow up the filibuster, Cornyn said this power is fleeting and at some point the shoe will always be on the other foot. Liberal activists may like the idea of nuking the filibuster today, but they'll soon find themselves ruining the day their party broke the Senate. His position now that Republicans are in a similar position, very different. He even wrote a recent opinion piece in the New York Post titled, "Why the SAVE Act Matters More Than the Filibuster." That's really disappointing, especially because it appears his change of heart has to do with trying to save his Senate seat. Cornyn is locked in a though Republican primary battle with Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, and both are vying for Trump's coveted endorsement. Cornyn seems to be saying that he thinks it's necessary to earn the presidential approval. Manchin, who stood up to his fellow Democrats, recently called out Cornyn on X for his hypocrisy, saying the filibuster, the soul of the Senate, has preserved the Senate's role for nearly 250 years as the institution that cools passions, protects minority voices, and demands consensus. America was built on institutions designed to resist political convenience, not surrender to it. Thankfully, most Republicans in the Senate remain committed to keeping this safeguard in place. Those who want to nuke it, should think carefully about whether mimicking short-sighted Democrats is what they want to do. On other news, how to buy March Madness Sweet 16 tickets for all 4 regions. How's your bracket going? Mine pretty much died with the first game. The first few days of March Madness saw a lot of chalk, but also some thrilling upsets in high quality basketball. The Sweet 16 is almost set, and it's time to start planning your attendance at one of the 4 regional sites: San Jose, California, Houston, Texas, Chicago, Illinois, and Washington, D.C. Each site will host 3 games, including 2 Sweet 16 games and 1 Elite 8 game. The matchups are not yet known, but all session passes are already available for all 4 sites. Here's everything you need to know to buy March Madness Sweet 16 tickets for all 4 regions. Buy March Madness Sweet 16 tickets. When is March Madness 2026? The first 4 tipped off the 2026 March Madness tournament on Tuesday, March 17th. The 2 rounds run between Thursday, March 19 and Sunday, March 22. The tournament concludes with the Final 4 on Saturday, April 4, and the National Championship game on Monday, April 6. Who is playing in the Sweet 16? The second round will wrap up today, Sunday, March 22nd. Here are the teams that have qualified for the Sweet 16 so far. East Region Sweet 16 teams: number 1, Duke; number 3, Michigan State. West Region Sweet 16 teams: number 4, Arkansas; number 11, Texas. Midwest Region Sweet 16 teams: number 1, Michigan. South Region Sweet 16 teams: number 2, Houston; number 3, Illinois; number 4, Nebraska. Where will the Sweet 16 take place? Each region will have a designated Sweet 16 location. Here's how it will be determined based on the team's region. East Region's teams will play at Capital One Arena in Washington, D.C. Shop Washington, D.C. Sweet 16 tickets if you want to attend. West Region teams will play at SAP Center in San Jose, California. Shop San Jose Sweet 16 tickets as well. Midwest teams will play at United Center in Chicago, Illinois. Get tickets for that as well if you're interested. South teams will play at Toyota Center in Houston, Texas. Get some tickets for that as well, or for all regions. Number 1, Washington, D.C. March Madness Sweet 16 tickets. Tickets for Sweet 16 March Madness games in Washington, D.C. are already available. Tickets are currently available as an all-session pass, or you can choose between session passes. An all-access pass gets you the same seat for all 3 games. Washington, D.C. all session passes start at $643. That's for Washington, D.C. Get your tickets now. Washington, D.C. Sweet 16 March Madness schedule. 3 games in total will be played at the Capital One Arena, with 2 Sweet 16 matchups on Friday and an Elite 8 matchup on Sunday. Here's a glance at the schedule. Friday, March 27, Sweet 16 games. And then there's Sunday, March 29, Elite 8 games. Get your tickets now. Potential East Regional Sweet 16 matchups: number 1, Duke, and number 3, Michigan State have already qualified for the Sweet 16 in Washington, D.C. Duke will play the winner of number 4, Kansas, versus number 5, St. John, and Michigan State will play the winner of number 2, UConn, and number 7, UCLA. Shop all Washington, D.C. Sweet 16 tickets if you want to attend. Number 2, Chicago March Madness Sweet 16 tickets. Tickets for Sweet 16 March Madness games in Chicago are already available. Tickets are currently only available on all session passes. However, that will change once matchups are finalized. If you want to see every game in Chicago during the Sweet 16 and Elite 8, an all-access pass gets you the same seat for all 3 games. Chicago all session passes start at $536. Chicago Sweet 16 March Madness schedule. 3 games in total will be played at United Center, with 2 Sweet 16 matchups on Friday and an Elite 8 matchup on Sunday. While we don't yet know the exact game times, usually they begin in the early evening, with the second game starting immediately following the conclusion of the first game. Here's a glance at the schedule we know so far. Friday, March 27, Sweet 16 games. Sunday, March 29, Elite 8 games. Get your tickets today. Potential Midwest Regional Sweet 16 matchups. As of the conclusion of games on Saturday night, number 1, Michigan is the only team to qualify for the Sweet 16 in the Midwest region. Check back Sunday for updates. Get your tickets for Chicago now. Number 3, Houston March Madness Sweet 16 tickets. Tickets for Sweet 16 March Madness games in Houston are already available. Tickets are available as a Thursday only pass, Saturday only pass, and all session pass, ensuring access to all 3 games. An all access pass gets you the same seat for all 3 games. Houston all session passes start at $572. Buy Houston all session pass. Houston Sweet 16 March Madness schedule. 3 games in total will be played at Toyota Center, with 2 Sweet 16 matchups on Thursday and an Elite 8 matchup on Saturday. While we don't yet know the exact game times, usually they begin in the early evening, with the second game starting within 30 minutes of the conclusion of the first game. Here's a glance at the schedule we know so far. Thursday, March 26, Sweet 16 games. Saturday, March 28, Elite 8 game. And again, get your tickets for that as well if you want to attend. Potential South Region Sweet 16 matchups. Number 2, Houston will take on number 3, Illinois. In the Sweet 16, number 4, Nebraska awaits the winner of number 1, Florida, versus number 9, Iowa, in the other Sweet 16 matchup based in Houston. Get your tickets for that as well. Number 4, San Jose March Madness Sweet 16 tickets. Tickets for Sweet 16 March Madness games in San Jose are already available. Tickets are currently only available as an all-session pass. However, that change as matchups are finalized, and all access gets you the same seat for all 3 games. San Jose all sessions passes start at $489. Get your all session passes today. San Jose Sweet 16 March Madness schedule. 3 games in total will be played at SAP Center, with 2 Sweet 16 matchups on Thursday and an Elite 8 matchup on Saturday. While we don't yet know the exact game times, usually they begin in the early evening, with the second game starting immediately after the first game. Here's what we know about the schedule so far. Thursday, March 26, Sweet 16 games. Saturday, March 28, Elite 8 games. Get your tickets today. Potential West Region Sweet 16 matchups. Number 4, Arkansas, and number 11, Texas, have already qualified for the Sweet 16 in San Jose, California. Arkansas will play the winner of number 1, Arizona, versus number 3. Number 9, I meant number 9, y'all. Utah State, while Texas will take on the winner of number 2, Purdue, versus number 7, Miami. Get your tickets today. Again, the March Madness 2026 full schedule for the men's tournament. March 17 through 18 is the first 4. March 19 through 20 is the first round. March 21 through 22 is the second round. March 26 through 27, Sweet 16. March 28, 29, Elite 8. April 4th through 5th, Final 4. And of course, the National Championship will take place on April 6th. Moving on to a little bit more of the details on the March Madness. Call it March Mildness. Dominant performances by top seeds are now the norm at the NCAA tournament. There's still madness in March. There are buzzer beaters, upsets, post-game tears, wait what? Moments that go viral and become part of NCAA tournament lore. The chaos that makes the tournament such a captivating 3-week spectacle is just getting a little hard to come by these days, and that might not be changing anytime soon. For every high point at VCU, which shredded perfect brackets by the millions while pulling first-round stunners over power conference schools, there is an ever-increasing helping of chalk as favorites crush dreams of potential Cinderellas before they even catch a glimpse of a glass slipper. The top 4 seeds in each region went 16-0 across an opening 2 days that were only occasionally compelling and competitive, just as top 4 seeds did a year ago. The average margin of victory in the first round was 17.4 points, the highest ever since the tournament expanded to 64 and then 68 teams. 14 games were decided by at least 20 points, a record, and Florida won by 59, the second biggest margin in tournament history. And while there is an increasing parity in women's basketball at the top, higher seeded teams also had little trouble during first round contests. Transfers and NIL increased the gap between haves and have-nots. It's not a coincidence that this run of dominance has come nearly in lockstep with the easing of transfer rules and ability of athletes to make money off their name, image, and likeness. St. Louis was one of the rare lower-seeded teams to make it to the round of 32 when the 9th-seeded Billikens raced by 8th-seeded Georgia on Thursday. Less than 48 hours later, they were run out of the floor by top-seeded Michigan. Wolverines forward Yaxel Lander so coveted in the transfer portal that he told the AP he was up to $9 million by Kentucky before choosing Michigan, had 25 points and 6 rebounds in the win. I think the talent gap at the top is more significant than it was, St. Louis coach Josh Schertz said. I think NIL has created that where just the size and physicality, that differences between the top 5 or 10 teams and everybody else. I do think there's a chasm. That chasm may be difficult to navigate in the short term and maybe the long term as major college athletics endures and a Wild West phase following the House settlement that allowed schools to pay athletes directly. The math is easy. The bigger the school, the bigger the budget. The bigger the budget, the easier it is to attract top talent, including rating the rosters of schools lower on the food chain. These teams that don't have the resources, it's just hard to keep anyone longer than 1 year, Texas Tech coach Grant McCasland said. If you're great, it's like you're in a catch-22. If you play great, you're gone because there's people with more resources. Players shine at small schools and then leave. Alabama coach Nate Oates became one of the hottest commodities in the late 2010s, while at Buffalo leading the Bulls to 32 wins in 2018-19 behind guard C.J. Massenberg. Back then, players who transferred had to sit out a year before being eligible at their new schools. That rule is no more, leaving Oates to wonder if he'd have been able to hold on to Massenberg for 4 seasons in the current climate. Rare in 2026 is the player who sticks and stays from signing day to graduation day. I'm sure he would have loved to stay and play for me, but it's going to be hard for him to turn down the amount of money he would have been offered, Oates said. The trickled-up effect is real. There was a time not so long ago when the Blue Bloods recruited the best high school players and threw them into the fry right away, while the lower-tier teams that became tournament darlings grew together over time. Not so much anymore. The big high major schools are no longer throwing freshmen and sophomores, highly rated talented players out there against the low to mid majors with the 5th-year seniors. UConn coach Dan Hurley said, "That's in part because so many seniors now find themselves in the big leagues after playing their way up the ladder. Schools are going out and purchasing a ready-made roster of grizzled, talented veterans," Hurley said. So the art of program building in colleges is over. Mid-major complain the power schools won't play them. Mid-major schools are also struggling to put together a schedule that prepares them for the step up in competition that awaits in March. It can sometimes lead to ugly mismatches like the ones prepared across this year's opening round. High Point wasn't one of those teams. The Big South champion Panthers more than held their own in fending off 5th-seeded Wisconsin on Thursday, continuing a long tradition of 12-seeded bracket busters. Still, Panthers coach Flynn Clayman said would like to see things tweaked so power conference programs are incentivized to hit the road or play on a neutral court every once in a while against strong mid-majors. Fans deserve to see High Point versus a good team in the non-conference, Clayman said. You can run down the list. Luck at Santa Clara against Kentucky. What a game that is. They deserve to get games. Purdue, Matt Painter understands the frustration, but isn't sure those games will happen with any regularity. The Boilermakers played 3 mid-majors this season, all at home. Any true road or neutral site non-conference games will likely be saved for other power conference programs as schools try to boost their NCAA tournament resumes. And that could make the brackets even chalkier as the years go on. Still, all it takes is one thunderclap moment by an underdog for the chalk to be washed away. That remains the ultimate lure of March for now. I think there was some teams that duped us this year. High Point forward Cameron Fletcher said, but I mean, like Coach Flynn said, we're here now, so there's no ducking anymore. In the tournament, for better or worse, there's never is. There never is. Moving on to other news. Trump push on mail-in ballots hits Supreme Court. What it means for the midterms. In Washington, a Republican push to limit mail-in ballots in elections is hitting the Supreme Court on March 23rd, and the case could have big implications for the upcoming midterms races. The case addresses whether absentee ballots must be received and not just postmarked by Election Day. Voting by mail has decreased since its peak during the COVID-19 pandemic, yet nearly 30% of voters still cast ballots by mail in the 2024 elections, and many states have grace periods for mailed ballots. President Donald Trump has long railed against mail-in voting, saying it is a practice vulnerable to fraud. He also baselessly insists it's cost him the 2020 election. Elections can never be honest with mail-in ballots voting, and everybody, in particular Democrats, know this. He wrote on Truth Social in August. Trump signed an executive order last year to overhaul elections, including eliminating grace periods for mail-in ballots received after Election Day. Some GOP-controlled states have changed their rules in response, and Democratic states have so far successfully challenged Trump's order in litigation, working its way through the courts. In a different legal challenge involving Mississippi's law, the Trump administration will join the Republican National Committee on March 23rd in trying to convince the Supreme Court that states are prohibited from counting mail-in ballots received after Election Day. Rejection rate for late arriving ballots is low. Daniel Thompson, a political scientist at the University of California, San Francisco, and an expert on how election rules affect outcomes, doubts that the case will have much influence on election results. States without grace periods for mail ballots have similar rejection rates for late arriving ballots as states with looser deadlines, he said. And the overall rejection rate for late arriving ballots in the 2020 elections was less than 1%, he said. Still the case, Watson versus Republican National Committee could play a role in public perceptions about election security, said Rick Hansen, an elections expert and law professor at UCLA. Watson fits in the broader panels of lawsuits over vote by mail. Hansen said in a webinar about the case, I think they're meant to please Trump, and they're meant to make the elections seem fraudulent. The case, however, has an unusual twist in that the law being challenged was passed by GOP-controlled legislator, and it's being defended by Mississippi Attorney General Lynn Fitch, a Republican. Reasonable people can disagree with Mississippi's policy. Chose to require only that absentee ballots be mailed by Election Day, Fitch told the Supreme Court in a filing. But federal law authorizes Mississippi to make that choice. Most states have grace periods for at least some mail-in ballots. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Mississippi amended its election laws to accept absentee ballots postmarked by Election Day, specifying that they could be counted if received within 5 business days. 29 states allow at least some late arriving ballots cast by U.S. service members and Americans living overseas to be counted, according to the National Conference of State Legislators. 14 states have extended deadlines as long as 2 weeks in Illinois for counting all mail ballots that are postmarked by Election Day. Groups representing veterans and retirees joining with Mississippi in defending the grace period. People are being stripped of their voting rights through no fault of their own because of delays in the postal service in states that don't count ballots that are received by Election Day, said Mark Elias, a Democratic elections attorney representing Vet Voices and the Alliance for Retired Americans. And because Democrats are more likely than Republicans to vote by mail, Elias said, the GOP is trying to kick out of the electoral voters who they would rather not have participate. GOP warns about risks of fraud. Conservative groups are backing the Republican National Committee's argument that strict deadlines are needed to prevent foul play. The longer the period over which the election is conducted, the greater the opportunity for a risk of fraud. A number of groups, including Gun Owners of America, wrote in a filing documented instances of fraud relating to voting by mail are rare, according to the MIT Election Data and Science Lab. A 2025 report from the Brookings Institution estimated there are about 4 cases of fraud for every 10 million mail-in votes. It's hard to blame Americans for those suspicions when some states produce quick results while others take days to even know how many ballots need to be counted, the Republican National Committee told the Supreme Court. Case turns on definition of election. The legal argument that RNC and the Justice Department are making turns on the definition of when an election has occurred. Because federal law sets a specific date for U.S. elections, Mississippi says the election happens when voters choose a candidate. The voters make that choice by casting, marking, and submitting their ballots, the state lawyers said in the written argument. So the federal election day status requires only that the voters cast their ballots by election day. The Republican Party and the Trump administration counter that an election is the day by which valid ballots must be received. Elections have consequences. They also have a definition, the Justice Department said in a filing. And from the dawn of America, election day has meant the day the ballot box closes, and when election officials must be in receipt of all ballots. A federal judge in Mississippi sided with the state, but the New Orleans-based 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, considered the most conservative appeals court in the country, sided with the GOP. Suspicions of impropriety. The Supreme Court touched on the question in 2020 when it overturned a judge's order requiring that Wisconsin count late arriving mail-in ballots during the COVID-19 pandemic. In a concurring opinion, Justice Brett Kavanaugh wrote that the one reason the judge erred was that he didn't sufficiently appreciate the significance of election deadlines. States that require ballots to be both postmarked and received by election day, Kavanaugh said, want to avoid the chaos and suspicions of impropriety that can ensue if thousands of absentee ballots flow in after election day and potentially flip the results of an election. These 2020 comments from a conservative justice whose vote could be key to deciding the case suggest sympathy for the GOP's stated policy concerns, but Kavanaugh was defending a state's right to require ballots to be received by election day, not asserting that all 4 states must do so. Carve out for military voters. Another consideration for the justices, however, are the votes from members of the U.S. military. The justices might be reluctant to block a practice that has benefited service members trying to vote when they deployed far from home. Still, have a high court could do what the appeals court did and say that military ballots are different because Congress has addressed them in a separate legislation. Lisa Dixon, executive director of the Center of Election Confidence and consultant for the Republican National Lawyers Association, called that outcome quite plausible. The court, she said, could certainly treat it as 2 different categories of ballots. Again, thank you for joining. I really appreciate it. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, comment down below, let me know what you think. Follow me on Instagram, the Studio 11. Follow me on X, the Studio 2020. I like to say Twitter. Follow me on Twitter. Thank you for joining, and of course, I'll see you on the next one.